I'm picking this picture from the little video that I've made to go with James's magnificent talk to us with the shadows. It's quite creepy, really. I mean, you know, we've all even seen that film and you know what it is, but in reality that is quite creepy because that thing is a leech. It needs you to feed for. So that's why I picked that. Yet again, I think this is the longest one I've done for James. It took me quite a long time, James, to make this video. But I am happy, and I hope that James is happy because he seems quite happy with my videos to his talks. And of course, James, if you do watch this, you can take any of these videos and put them on your channel if you want. Yeah, because you're in them. And yet again, like I say, we have an ongoing conversation, and then James sends me one of these masterpieces. I do quite like today's one. I think today's was one of the best ones that James has. I'm not saying the others are bad, James. The others are very, very good. You know, I told you what I thought about you, and we had to change that. I'm not one of those, so we already know. Well, to me, you're very wise and everything, but I think today's was a really good. This one was a really good one. I really, even though it took me a long time, James, I like the end result of you and me making this video for everybody to hear. Yes, and what should I do now? I should say, watch this video and leave your comments afterwards. Thanks very much, James. Here we go.
The easiest way to understand this reality is to look at patterns. Firstly, you have a world that is based on a business model in that there is planned obsolescence in products because you don't want to create something that once bought or once purchased, you haven't got a customer coming back for more. So you have to find ways to entice those customers back. Now, it's very easy with computer games and things or devices. You have upgrades, you have apps, all manner of ways of getting people to come back. And obviously, when you consider the first mobile phones were analog, they had a little aerial thing built in, and very soon became obsolete with the changeover from analog to digital. So that's just one example of that. Obviously you have games and things where you buy the console but then you've got to buy the games or download them. And the pattern repeats over and over again with this. And that saying about what is sweet to the mouth, or sweet to the taste, is bitter to the belly. Very much the case with foods. This is the sort of Roman eat, drink and be merry, keep people, offer them something so they just have a full belly and then not want to move and just go along with whatever's suggested. This is the other part of the thing. There's a saying about there is no quick fix route, and that becomes a readily apparent second blueprint, shall we say. An example of that would be turning to alcohol to escape this reality. If you're not happy with your life, you may drink to block it out, but of course it's a temporary thing. And that could be scratch cards, that could be smoking, it could be injecting, things that take your mind out of this reality. They're all a quick fix escape, but they're quite the opposite. And that's another pattern that becomes very apparent with this reality. But whilst on the one hand you can see that everything that is offered, it's very cloak and dagger. It's a gift with one hand, but there's always a catch to it. So have a mobile phone, make your life easy. Pay by card. It's just one step away at the moment, because you can tap your bank card or what they call the contactless payment, and it's just a bleep. But how open that is to malfunction, and you could be at fault with the card and then you're locked out, and it also, by getting rid of cash transactions, which is basically passing on a debt, it just promissory notes in exchange for, as far as the workplace goes, you're exchanging your time and your energy for a worthless piece of paper. The piece of paper only has value when it's agreed upon by two or more, but it's a collective agreement of, say for example, a £5 note or a €5 note or a $5 note, banknote. And then if you hand it over for something and something costs 1.43, for example, then if you're happy to hand that piece of paper over and get the thing and some change back, well, that's job done, as it were. But now it becomes even more convenient. You haven't got to carry coins. You haven't got to go to the bank and get these bits of paper out. You can just go contactless. Now, in this technological age, I'll get it right in a minute, where computers work really fast at processing data, how easy it is to track and trace everybody, because you know the time, you know the location, you know the goods being purchased. You can also see how much that person is spending. And when all that data is collected, how easy to write in algorithms. It's like, well, if the income of this person is X amount, but their outgoings are in excess of that, there's a red flag. It's like, well, where's this extra money coming from? And this system will obviously want to know, because it wants some of it. The hidden hand is a usurer. It wants to dip in and take out. The term person, if you think about it, if you break it down, hear it, ignore the spell, but if you hear the sound, purse on, the purse that holds the money, holds the coins, it's on, therefore it is open, it's active. Just like they would say about a bank account being dormant or active if there's been no activity. And same with email addresses. There's a new thing, I've seen a notification, if you haven't used an account for 2 years, it will be removed, shut down, reassigned. So it's all tracking and tracing, but why would that need to be done? Well, effectively, if you have a creator that is all-seeing and all-knowing, if you have something that wishes to set itself up as a rival to that, or to try and usurp that and replace it and set itself up as to say, we are the creators, we rule over you because we created everything, we control everything, then it's going to have to find a way of tracking, tracing, monitoring, knowing exactly what's going on. It's not far off in a way if you think about it. In George Orwell's 1984, where you can have such things as thought crimes. It's going that way with, you can't just say anything on the internet. There are certain subjects, certain topics you cannot talk about openly because words become weaponized, and then if you try and have an open and honest and rational debate about something, there's a weaponized label. It would be something like, oh, that's racist, or that's inciting hatred, or you name it. It's almost like a protection of the criminal, because if there is a perception of something and it would say, for example, it would seem to be one group, wouldn't it be better to have it discussed, and it would come to light whether it was true or whether it was a certain section of a certain group of people. That leads me on to something. I was listening to Robert Phoenix with Dr. Longo on Old World Florida Channel, and I have to mention the first Dracula film, Nosferatu. It's a silent film. I'm pretty certain you can still find it on YouTube quite easily. Now, I remember watching this. It was when you're about 14 or 15 and you've got a new television station called Channel 4 that starts up. That's like 3-4 steps beyond anything that BBC Two did, because before that you had 3 stations. You had BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV. And BBC Two would do the sort of, in some ways, should we say, the more interesting programmes. Now Channel 4 has come along and taken it a step further, and there were some very interesting things. The Music Channel's CGI host Max Headroom, there's a series, it's a private investigator who's looking into, would you believe, creating something that's half computer, half human. It's very in the sort of line of the predictive programming. I think it may well have been called Max Headroom. It's a long time since I've watched this. I have watched it subsequent in more recent years, but well, I'd be classed as having amnesia, shall we say, but I have huge gaps in memories, and things are very much like a fog. It's like trying to remember a dream. The only part that's really held is the emotion in a given scenario, but the details of the when, where, and the who, it's very much like a dream. I've gone off on a tangent here, so let's bring this back. So yes, Nosferatu. It's a silent, black and white silent era. I believe it's from the early 1920s. So you have this Nosferatu who has these very distinct archetype facial characters. For those of you that remember the satire comedy with the latex rubber puppets called Spitting Image, there was a Labour MP called Gerald Kaufman who would come on in the scene, and he'd got this very slimy sort of greenish sort of look about him, and he'd go whisper, whisper, whisper. The same group that this archetype of Nosferatu represents, and Nosferatu is basically a vampire. It's a bloodsucker. It's a parasite, basically, and it does. The implication from that, it does seem to represent something. Now, to me, it's very much a Mandela effect. I'd completely forgotten all about this until it was mentioned on this discussion between Dr. Longo and Robert Phoenix on Old Bowl, Florida. Now, I remember looking at this film, or seeing this film, probably about the age of 15 on Channel 4, probably late at night. They did all the Boris Karloff Frankensteins as well, and Vincent Price films, Theatre of Blood. I distinctly remember that. I'm just trying to remember that. Yes, so Nosferatu, when I saw that film at that age, hand on heart, I am 100% certain that what I saw was this pendant around Nosferatu's neck, which was basically a six-pointed star. Now, in more recent years, I know I have tried to... I've been all the way through the film to look for the scenes that... And of course, it's not there anymore. But I can clearly remember that, and combined with the facial features... Oh, actually, and this has just come back into the mind. Excuse me. The shadows that are cast on the walls in this film of this Nosferatu as he's appearing. Another example would be from Oliver Twist, the child handler called Fagin, who is not Irish, shall we say. I think you can work out what I'm implying here, but this is one of these subjects that you can't openly talk about, and it makes you wonder why. But then when you start looking round, and you don't have to do a lot of digging, and then you do find this particular group that on one hand will claim to be a nation, on another hand they will claim to be a religion, and the next thing they're claiming to be a race, a distinct race, that set itself apart from everything else and proclaimed itself to be God's chosen. Which implies a sort of mindset of we're holier than thou and you can never be one of us. You can almost see the same thing repeated in such things as golf clubs with exclusive memberships where it's like where you can join, you can pay to join, but you're never going to be part of that inner circle. But you might do very nicely out of it. Lana Elabonte has made a beautiful discussion about Rome and how Rome never fell, and this ties into this as well. If you see the little prayer hats that the Vatican priests wear in their costume, and how that, and it's also pointed to about the fish hat as being Babylonian. These things, there's no accident, no coincidence with any of these things. So Lana was talking about there were two sides, and the wrong side won because they had more resources. I don't quite agree with that. I would say what they had was an infrastructure of communication which you can spread information or disinformation. Now, being a distinct group that is a stranger in every nation, as a merchant of Venice, for example, you're also running the trade routes. You're adding on a bit to the price of the thing that you've paid for it to then resell it. See, there's the business model again. You build in your transport costs and the logistics, but not only are you offering shiny trinkets and things which people seem there's always some that will readily say, yeah, I want that. You've only got to look at Wild West films as well, where you get that doctor in the top hat who turns up with these miracle cures in a bottle. I think we could see the origin of the pharmaceutical industry being shown in this one. And you've also got the deception thing, because you'll have a little decoy in the gathering crowd around this quack who's selling these special miracle lotions that will restore your hair or whatever, and of course you'll have somebody come out the crowd and say, it's true, I bought this last week and look, I can walk again. That kind of thing. But of course, in these small towns, I've always wondered why nobody has turned around and said, well, who the hell are you? Because I've never seen you before. That's the one bit they always leave out of these Wild West films, because that one in the audience, that decoy, that deception, with that misinformation, saying, yes, I was cured, but there was never anything wrong with him, it's just a way of making a sale. There was never any questioning, and people seem to just take things at the superficial level, and this is their undoing, not looking deep enough into things. This reality programs everybody it's increasingly instant and now and buy now, interest free for 6 months, don't need to pay back until whenever. That's creating a debt, that's creating indentured servitude straight away. Invisible chains, you see. Slavery still exists, it's never stopped existing. Slavery is also human trafficking. Well, human trafficking goes on today. It is going on all the time under everybody's noses. It's the very much planned resettlement of peoples called immigration, and you'll have things like European Union dictates and directives coming out of Brussels. At one time, the directives for Europe to satellite and puppet governments came out to Berlin, but that's morphed across to Brussels. But the same thing of issuing dictates, and you must take these people in, these refugees, which often you'll find that these refugees are all young men. It's like, well, where are the women and the children? Just saying, and they're always from culturally, dynamically very different places. It's never an immigration for a country with a similar culture and background, you'll notice. It's almost like the system wants to create more and more division, which it does. There's this huge cake called Babel, a Tower of Babel. To make this cake, what you do, you get 3 ingredients. You get fear, ignorance, and superstition. You add in a few spices like divide and conquer, and then you create many tears. Many, many tears. And of course, you end up with basically a pyramid shape, because you'll have very little at the top and an awful lot at the bottom, and that's the business model. When it talks about Egypt in the Bible, let's just break the word Egypt down as to what it really is. Bearing in mind that the Bible is it's all metaphor and parable. Egypt, the E is energy. The T is the I, the capital I at its highest level. That's our higher self. Now, between the energy and your higher self, there is a thing in the middle, GYP, G-Y-P, which means to steal or theft. Egypt is anything external of you, and you've only got to look round at the infrastructure of all businesses, all clubs, all societies, governments, religious institutions, and any kind of entity, any non-living thing that is referred to as the, like the government, the church, the religion, all these kind of things, non-living entities basically. And they all work on this pyramid system where, like with the Catholic Church, you've got the pontiff, the Pope at the top, and then you've got your, the archdeacons and deacons and canons and I don't know the terminology. They're all income bents. There's no accident with these words. I mean, I'm not particularly picking on that one relight of the jinn, that religion, because all religions have an element of truth with an awful lot more deception. That's how things work. That's how you sell things. You have something that looks good, that is tempting. Same with food. We're determined by taste on what we eat. The things that are actually the worst for you always taste the best. Deep fried things, basically. Salty stuff, greasy, many things with artificial flavourings and colourings and things, but they always taste so good. But that's by design, of course. But what is sweet to the taste is bitter to the belly. It's finding that fine line with all these things. It's using discernment. Now, you all know what CERN is. It's meant to be circular. It most likely does put out some sort of frequency that causes a concern and causes many concerns. It would seem to be some sort of frequency impulse weapon aimed at the mental state. It would not surprise me, because if you think about television, it's broadcast, radio is broadcast, and it's through the air. Even if you were to go with the idea of satellites and satellite dishes, there is no physical connection. It's something that is passing unseen, that the five senses can't readily detect, but it's there. As I speak this, there is no physical connection. I'm creating a disturbance in the ether, a vibration, which is being stored as a data and then running somewhere else down through wires at some point, and then it's coming out somewhere else as a modulation, which is then decoded, which then the human ears will pick up on that vibration and decode them in the mind as words. So in a way you could say we are all babbling, but it's got this huge intermediate thing that can encode it and then decode it again at the other end. But ultimately that decoding goes on inside us. Well, I could go on so many tangents with this one now. I just noticed we're up to 26 minutes. So the layers of the onion, it's often an expression used in truth-seeking, getting through the outer layers and getting closer and closer to the truth. Not really. That's just shining a light on the illusory power structure that we have been deceived into accepting and going along with, being complacent and complicit to. We are all guilty of this in some form or another. There are some that are willfully ignorant who would refuse this because it sets up this uncomfortable thing. This is what Lana Labonte talks about. Initially you feel angry at them. Those that have offered these scripts and said you have to do this and you have to do that, it's by coercion, it's by manipulation, and you have this mentality of, Well, it's always been that way. So that's why we do it that way. You can see this played out in the Disney Pixar Bugs Life. That is a very good analogy to what is this way this world is run, if you think about what those grasshoppers represent and what the ants represent. That saying in that film, it's no. Ants pick the food, ants keep the food. Not ants pick the food, grasshoppers take the food. That's like the hidden hand. That's like getting all the participant ants, all the occupant ants, all the descent ants, which you ensnare within shore ants. I could go off on a tangent here about history, the flood. If you have rising sea levels, therefore you have less land. So straight away you start herding people into smaller and smaller areas. It's a Russell, it's a hustle, it's a new type of brand. It's a Russell brand. He seems to be making the news across many channels. I keep seeing his name mentioned on various channels' videos. Observation Deck, I noticed yesterday. I haven't watched that yet. But a Russell, a hustle, it's as part of the distraction. Yes, maybe it might be like Find the Light RV channel has basically channeled the higher self, and this is one that's got too deep into the thing and will be set up to be discarded. And this is now coming out about the 2012 opening ceremony of the Olympic Games with all this, and I'm sure you can go and find it if you so wish, but remember, it is all really a distraction away from going inside oneself. See, ultimately, when this is the internal process. You will feel anger. This is what Lana talks about, and I know from the same experience. You feel anger of how dare they do this to us. Then it's, hold on a minute, they're not actually doing anything. We're doing it to us. Humanity is its own gatekeeper. Humanity is, by going along with these things and not having the courage to basically do what is expressed in that children's story, the king has no clothes. This deceptive merchant, you see again, who says to the king, I've made you this coat, only the worthy can see this. Now, straight away, it's the table turning being played out here. You see the pattern with this. Well, I don't want, the king will be thinking, well, I'm the king, I don't want to appear as if I'm unworthy. What will all my subjects think of me? I'll lose my power. Well, of course I can see the coat, see this new coat, and how fine it looks. What do you think of it? Asking all the subjects. Now, one, he's the king. He has the power to have them beheaded or arrested and whatever, in that sort of autocratic dictatorship. So, of course, they're all going to go along with it, and hence you've just got the boy who said, he's naked. I can see he's naked. The one that is honest, the inner child, and it would be a child that would do it. Children ask what to parents are these awkward questions. Why's that man got no hair and things like that, or why's that woman got no hair? And it's like, oh shit, she said chemotherapy, and now I feel embarrassed. And that sets up that really awkward thing. But children will just ask questions in innocence. We are discouraged from acknowledging our inner child that actually is our best guide. Many of you that listen to a channel like this will have heard the expression about go within, you already know the answers inside yourself. Well, that is a perfect analogy. The inner child, if you can take yourself back, it's about remembering. You don't have to remember every detail, but remembering as opposed to being dismembered. You're putting yourself back together, you're rebuilding yourself, you're breaking pattern with the old generational sins of man, is the expression for it. it's not about blaming your parents. It's not about blaming your grandparents or their parents or the parents before them. And you just keep going back and back and back. And it's like, well, whose fault is it? While you're going along with it, especially once you recognise it as well, if you're just still going to go along with it, although you can see that, well, this is how humanity has been played, then you're the one that is guilty. You have to, therefore must take responsibility, because you're knowingly now going along. Fair enough when you don't know, because it is a big thing to see how vast this whole system is, that affects every moment of every day of our life, and it starts before the umbilical cord is even cut. Before you come into this world and find yourself in a physical body, which you need to operate in this realm of materialism, you need a material body. But there comes to a point where you're separate from it. It's known as death, which is only a separation of spirit from matter, because the matter is part of this material realm, so it has to remain here, which is why it is called remains, because it can't go anywhere else. If you look up at the sky, especially at night, and stories about those little lights, some of those things are fantastical gazillion, billion light years, and it would take you many, many lifetimes to even get there, and all this thing. It could just be that they're all just different sizes, and they're no further apart than each other. But consider also, when you look up at that night sky, what about between those stars? How would you see those stars if there wasn't that darkness? Now, this is also hopefully a clue as to what we are in, this realm. It's one of contrast and one of duality. It is very much a realm of this reflection. Again, in spirituality, we talk about reflect upon, and be the reflection, be the light in the world. Reflect upon things that are presented to you, because they are all reflections, they are all lessons to learn from. It's like, why does this keep happening to me? You attract where you're at. If you feel the world is against you, that is the energy you will attract, and that is the outcome you will attract towards yourself. We are all masters at attracting, manifesting the very thing that we fear most. Because we focus attention to it, we give energy to it. It's far better to be neutral and just observe. Now, turning back to this whole topic of these merchants, the Nosferatus of this world, which probably are not very many when it comes to the very tip of this pyramid, which is actually inverted. It's something from the underworld, shall we say. It's something cancerous, it's something parasitic, it's something that feeds in an acidic way that destroys it. What it creates is destruction wherever it goes. It's perfectly expressed in the film Independence Day. Now, do you want to be independent and dependent on something that is outside of yourself? Because if you go and seek outside of yourself, you go without, and you really will go without. But if you go within, it's that simple instruction: seek the kingdom within and all will be given to you. Really simple instruction, but it seems a very difficult one, because it does seem so incredible, because you have to come out of the perception of only seeing things in the material. The material, solid matter reality cannot formulate, and it cannot answer things that happen that are in the unseen, that don't have a physical form. There's more things that cannot be measured and compared in the unseen that manifest and become reality. This is another aspect of this whole realm. It seems that things can come in, and once they take a physical form, they cannot go back out. But where are we? We're in a reflection. We're quite close to the edge of time, the very edge of existence. This material realm is pretty much as solid and as dense as it's going to get. Really, you can't go much more solid than if you go down to the rock kingdom, which only has a physical body, but it still has an energy, it still has a life force. But when you go within, that's actually the portal. Now, the universe is you in verse. It's far greater on the inside than the outside. In the long-running science fiction series Doctor Who, you have that blue police box with the initials, it's called TARDIS, Time and Relative Dimension in Space. That's us. It's blue because it's representing divine feminine. The only policing that needs to be done is policing yourself. But of course, this reality is such that things have stepped up a notch in the mentality stakes, that you're no longer capable of deciding for yourself what is hate speech and what is something you can weigh up for yourself and decide for yourself. That it's like the government, which of course is a non-living entity, that is only held together as a concept. Same as a nation. They're only held together as concepts. They're not actually real. This thing will decide what is best for you. The only one that knows what is best for you is you. No one will love you as much as you love yourself. And as part of loving yourself, obviously it's doing as best we can to look after the vehicle that we find ourselves in, the physical body as well. Now, there are many schools of thought on this, whether to go vegan, whether to go on this or that diet. My personal findings have been that natural and naturally grown, you feel the difference, but that's not always possible and not always practical depending on where you are, and it's not made easy to move to or relocate. But go with what feels right to you. You could go down the intelligence route with that one and be decided on price, but go with a gut feeling, not the mind or the ego or the thing that, oh, I'm tempted to that. The sugary, sweet things and things like that. But find a balance as best you can would be my advice on that one, the best you can in the circumstances you're in, because you can overwrite a lot of these things with the power of the mind anyway. What you think causes a chemical change in the physical body. It's going to have an effect on the amounts of serotonin, adrenaline, and so on. So you set up conditions in the body from the thoughts you have and the feelings you have. So you can easily overwrite that. The easiest way is to live in the moment. Don't worry about the future. Just live in the very moment right now. And go with the universal law of assumption that you already have that which you desire. The more you can import that feeling into the body, it then works like a magnet and will attract. You attract where you're at. I'm not saying this is easy to do. I'm saying this takes an awful lot of practice, because you need to overwrite what the 5 external senses are presenting to you as being true. And often the analysis of the facts, or the apparent facts of, oh, I haven't got this, or I'm going to run out of that in X number of days, becomes, what's the saying, false evidence appearing real, fear. Because then you start putting more energy into the fear of the thing, which will actually make it into a reality. Now, that doesn't even have to have a physical form. It can play out in the physical reality of, oh, I did run out of this, or I did run out of that, because I was worrying about running out of this or that, because I'd focused my attention onto that, which caused a tension in the mind. That is perhaps the best explanation I can give to any of you that imagination creates reality. It depends how much feeling you put into something. But practice makes perfect. Everything in this reality is expressing that as well. Nobody comes into this world knowing the 12 times table. It is learnt by repetition. Nobody learns their oath of allegiance or Lord's Prayer or whatever it is except through repetition, memorizing. It's the system programming called education. That's how the whole thing sort of operates. But you can also see in that this non-living entity, this system, and this hidden hand that is presenting these and offering these scripts, could be buy now, pay in 6 months type of thing, or a promise of this for tomorrow, but pay this much in a week, and in X number of years you'll have this nest egg and you can retire, and it will make all this interest, it will be invested in stocks and shares. It's all promises that may or may not happen, and personally I would not trust any of it. I wouldn't even trust the lottery as being genuine. Why do I say that? Because there's such thing as facial recognition, there are cameras everywhere. Where can you buy a lottery ticket where you're not going to be seen on camera? And you may even make it easy for the system and pay by card. And then they definitely know what you're purchasing. And it'll all be logged and tracked and traced, and know what numbers you've picked and what lottery ticket you've got. And there are no winners, there are people that are selected to highlight certain stories, which in themselves would seem to be true. But then there is an underlying psychological message. Notice underlying psychological message that is being pushed of, oh look, that person won the lottery and they squandered it and went through over £1 million in 6 months. That's a huge negative psychological message being pushed repeatedly with that one. This is news. This is north, east, west and south, looking everywhere except inside yourself. These are just a few examples of the scripts that are being suggested. So returning now to Nosferatu. Nosferatu has a nose that's like a beak. Now there's a symbol that you'll see repeated throughout history. The Roman Empire had it. The Third Reich used it. the United States of America Corporation uses it. I refer to the eagle. Now think about what an eagle does. It's a bird of prey. It's looking for something to prey upon. It will swoop, and then it will come down, it will get its claws in, and it will steal. That is pretty much an egoic parading of a trophy being displayed, and also a revealing being displayed of the nature of this hidden hand. So I think that's a good place to stop. There's quite a lot there to weigh up and consider. Now I can't really mention the name of the group, but I think most of you could work out from what has been said. Now, what does an eagle do? It comes down and grabs and gets its claws in. You could say it seizes. Hence, you have tsar, T-S-A-R, you have C-Z-A-R, Khazar, you have Caesar, and of course you have Khazarians. You may want to look into the official narrative on those. Disregard about dates or anything, you just look at what religion was adopted. Consider also things like the Bolshevik Revolution, and the area that was affected by that is a very similar sort of part of the world. I think that's a really good place to stop.